All right, well, good morning, Rocky Hill Church, life group facilitators, small group facilitators. Christopher Scott here. It's good to see you. It is Monday, September 14th at 8:45. I want to continue these videos we're doing. We're going to talk about the book of 2 Corinthians today, and then I'm going to give you a brief facilitator tip from this book, How to Ask Great Questions, that I really like. So let's talk about 2 Corinthians, okay? So in the Bible, there are 66 books. 66 books in the Bible, 39 in the Old Testament, 27 in the New Testament. Out of those 27 books in the New Testament, there are 13 letters written by Paul. Okay, 13 letters written by Paul. And out of those 13 letters written by Paul, there are 5 that were written from prison. 4 are called prison letters, and the other one is called a pastoral letter. Those 4 prison letters are Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, and Philemon. Those are 4 letters that Paul wrote from prison, but he was released, okay? And then there's another letter Paul wrote from prison, which is 2 Timothy. That's the very last letter that Paul ever wrote, and he was murdered, or he was killed shortly after writing 2 Timothy. So those first 4 prison letters, and then there's that last one, 2 Timothy. And so the Apostle Paul wrote these letters to the believers in the city of Corinth. We have 1 Corinthians and 2 Corinthians, but Paul actually wrote 4 different letters to the believers in the city of Corinth. We know that because when you read 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 9, he references a letter he has already sent to them. Okay, so there's this first letter he wrote, then there's 1 Corinthians, and then when you read 2 Corinthians, chapter 7, verses 8 through 12, it references this sharp, pointed letter that Titus carried to them between 1 Corinthians and 2 Corinthians. So Paul actually wrote 4 different letters to the believers in the city of Corinth, and we have the second and the fourth letter, pretty much. Okay, so we have the second and the fourth. 1 and 2 Corinthians, they're really the second and the fourth, but we don't have those other 2 letters that he wrote to them. And Paul made 3 different missionary journeys. If you read the book of Acts, it documents these different missionary journeys. So he went on the first missionary journey, and then he wrote Galatians, which is the first book to be written about in the Bible. Galatians was probably written about 49 AD. And then the book of James, about 50 AD, right in there. They're both really, really early. And then, so Paul goes on a second missionary journey, and between his second and third missionary journey, Paul writes 1st and 2nd Corinthians, and he writes 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, okay? So that's a little introduction to the book of 2 Corinthians. The city of Corinth, the church there is kind of known as the problematic church, and if you read these 2 letters, it becomes clear. They got some issues going on, and he's trying to straighten out those issues, which is why he wrote 4 different letters to them, okay? So that's 2 Corinthians. Now I want to talk to you about this book, How to Ask Great Questions. In here she has 10 tips for asking great questions. The 8th tip is help people talk to each other. Help people talk to each other. And as a small group facilitator, that really is your goal, is to get people to read their Bible, pitch some questions out to them, and get them to talk and discuss it among themselves. And you facilitate and you help that go on. Here's what Karen Lee Thorpe says about how to help people talk to each other. It's easy for a guided discussion to focus on the leader. The leader asks a question and one person answers. The leader asks another question and another person answers. Everyone looks at the leader and talks to the leader. In a healthy group, people talk to each other. The leader asks a question, someone responds, and someone else responds to what the previous person said. They look at each other. If people are not automatically talking to each other, there are ways to encourage them to do so. She says in chapter 5, we'll address the follow-up questions that help people respond to one another. Chapter 2 will explain how getting people to tell their stories builds the kinds of relationships that undergird genuine discussions. So you want to help people talk to each other. Pastor Christopher Scott here. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned a little bit about 2 Corinthians and how to ask great discussions in your small group. We'll catch you soon.